תראה מה נעשה, מעביר את האוטו קונטיינר לגז. בוא נגז מזה. באמת כל פרויקט זה שעתיים להעביר. הוא בינתיים צועק עליי, למה כל האלה סביבה זה?
אני מאוד אהבתי בגישת שיימינג שלו. אדיר. המיילים של שחר גמר אותי.
השיימינג כן, ראית, אבל כמה זה אנחנו.
משהו שהוא סיפר לי שאתה לא רואה, זה התמונה שהוא בציג שם, תסתכל בזה שלך, זה לייזי פילג'י. תמונה, תראה, שהוא לייזי פילג'י.
אתה יודע משהו, גם לא חושב שכמובן הראשון, זה היה כסערכות כדי לבצע את היצונים. זה לא עצרו כל תעתינים. ובפועל שהוא אלה עם זה, זה היה תעצרו כל תעתינים. עכשיו אני תכנן, זה כאן בטח מכאן במשהו.
אל תלכי בשעה,
הדגל הזה עובד ב-70%.
הדגל של לא להשתמש.
נשים? הדגל של נשים?
אני מדבר על פוסט.
יש דגל של פוסט. לא, בכל הפרויקטים.
באמת?
לא בסדר, בסטודנטים, בדברים האלה.
בוקר טוב, בוא נתחיל. שחר, בוא נתחיל. היום יש לנו הרצאה אחת של דוד, מהקבוצה של סיס, הצוות של CRM בקבוצה הזאת, על פאקו. בעצם משימת גיל שהוא לקח, מסכם מה שהדוד עושים שהוא עשה, לספר לנו על פאקו. אחרי זה אנחנו ממשיכים לעבוד על משימות גיל, ככה רק כדי לקבל מבט כללי, כמה בעצם יש לך משימה היום מהשוק, הולך למשימה?
האם יותר טוב?
הולך. שוב פעם, למי שאין עדיין משימה, לרן יש פורמט, יש לו מספיק משימה.
אני מוכן במקומה.
מזמנים לגשת אליו. שוב פעם, גם אם אתם צריכים עזרה בקוד ריוויו, בקצת גם סוגים של משימות שאנחנו רוצים לקבל ולעשות. זה המקום שלנו היום רק עד 4, אם אני זוכר נכון, אפשר לדבר על זה עוד פעם.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, people. So I'm here today, like you said, to finish up my guild task. Hopefully on the way, whet your appetite a bit about Talcor. I say whet your appetite because it gives a short overview and not in-depth Talcor. And so what is Talcor? So this is the original Talcor, and we all remember and love, and at least those who've seen the never-ending story, and you can probably guess why the American producers put an L into the name and take the original Japanese. Okay, so what is Falcor.js? So to understand what this framework is about, it's probably good to go and see what was driving Netflix to create this framework, what was hurting them in performance and latency. And it's not only Falcor, a lot of mega scale companies have been looking for ways to improve latency and manageability. And so Netflix came up with Falcor. Other companies, namely Facebook, came up with a different solution. And this is where we'll start. So these companies were out to look for a different solution, to move away from the traditional REST MVC setup and find a more streamlined solution for the. So let's talk about REST and the traditional setup. So what drives people to use REST in general? REST is a very generic API. It's set up so that each resource has its one place that it can be, and it's one place to get it, and everybody has to, all views have to, or any any users of the API have to straight to that setup. And with REST, you can leverage the power of HTTP caching, which is a multi-tier, multi-level cache, a very powerful cache, and it's robust and it's been well tested. And but this comes at a cost. REST will usually require quite a few round trips to the server until you get all the data you need for your view. And REST headers themselves are a lot of times much bigger than the message itself because you're using full HTTP headers for every request. So you're getting large message sizes and also if you need only a small portion of the data, but you're using a very clean REST API, you're going to get the whole data from the request, and maybe you use just a small portion. Okay, so this is what Netflix REST API started out with a few years ago, and it was very, very clean, very straightforward. You would get a message about this size, maybe a few more fields, and with it you would get your HTTP headers, which were much bigger than the request itself. And so this is like what Netflix looked like a few years ago. That's what load time would be. All the slides with the white background I took from Jafar Hussain. Jafar Hussain is a top engineer at Netflix. He's the mind behind Falcor, and he's part of the Wiseman Council for the future of JavaScript. So the slides with the white background are from Jafar Hussain and were from the official Falcor site. So traditional REST APIs, by testimony from Netflix and other places, will evolve into an RPC style application API. The RPC style meaning that for every view you're going to build a very specific function. RPC meaning client server, but still you're building a specific function for each view so that you can build a very tailored size message, and you can batch all the data you want in a single call to the server. That's what any developer experiencing latency problems with multiple calls to the server, that's what they'll eventually do. They'll start building special functions to get exactly what you want. Okay, what happens then? You get an abundance of endpoints because you're building. Netflix talks about 80 microservices. I don't know what's happening in Wix, but 80 microservices. Each microservice is going to have a few controllers. Each controller is going to have multiple actions. So it just grows and grows and grows. You're building more and more functions, each tailored to a specific view. It becomes very difficult to maintain. And then you can't use HTTP caching because you're getting the same data from different endpoints, and you have to manually manage your cache. And eventually you'll have on your screen, you'll have different views of the same resource showing different data, because to consistently manage all the connections between different resources on the page, something that you have to, that is very specific. So okay, so then at Netflix they advanced to an RPC style API, and like I said, they lost the cache consistency. You're asking for a list of titles, and you're getting them in the list, and then you're asking for more details in the title, and you're getting the same information, but it's sitting in two different places in memory, and it's two different URLs. You can't use HTTP cache, and you can have stale copies. So I guess they went to look for a solution that would give them the good of both worlds, the best of both worlds, and they came up with Falcor. So Falcor, important, it's not a replacement of your web server MVC framework or database system. Let me say that it is a replacement of your talking to the server, your AJAX request. You're now making AJAX requests only through Falcor. On the server side, there's a Falcor server waiting for the Falcor browser to ask it to query it for information. And so we'll get into more detail about that. So one thing I noticed, I mean, preparing for this talk, I watched quite a few talks on Falcor, read some stuff, and I noticed that different people see different great things about Falcor. I took 4 here, there are quite a few more, and I'll just go over them quickly and we'll get into more detail about them later on. So one important thing is that in Falcor you have one model everywhere. That means you look at your JSON model as the same shape on your server and on your client, and you don't really know where it's sitting or what's sitting where. You treat it the same way. You use JSON graph, or Falcor uses JSON graph because plain JSON is made for tree-style data. But once you have references within your JSON, it becomes complex, and they've kind of solved that with building different types. Building upon JSON, it's still pure JSON and can be JSON linted or checked, but it has special types within the JSON, so you can use references and build a graph-style JSON file. You save on HTTP requests by using client-side request grouping, and you save on server or callbacks to the server by using server-side redirects, which means you redirect within the server without going before you're answering to the client. But really, what's one of the brightest points of Falcor is that you have a virtual JSON endpoint. What does this mean? It means that to the developer or the user, it could seem as if the entire cloud is on their device. You really can't tell what's coming from the server and what was loaded in cache or stored previously. And all your data is exposed as a single JSON graph. Okay, so the data is the API is one of the fundamental ways of thinking about Falcor. You get rid of your multiple calls to controllers, multiple special custom-made view calls made by views, and the result is that if you can agree on a domain shape in your business model, and you know how to draw that in JSON, you can start to work to fill that JSON file, that JSON graph, with the data using your actual services, your backend, whatever you've been using up to date to get the information. The front end knows the shape of the JSON, so they can use the paths in the JSON within their views already. They're not waiting to see what the shape of the server API calls is going to look like. And really the view controls exactly how much of the graph we're going to fetch. So what does that look like? Imagine behind the router you have calls to anywhere in the cloud, anywhere in your system, different services to calling getting different information. The client can send its JSON paths to the router. The router understands what you're looking for and builds for you the response. Router is Falcor. Everything right with the router is your own in-house, your own. Okay, so so this is just to show you can really query your model just like you would query any JSON file. Only the syntax is slightly different. If you were querying a JSON file, you could say member location address. With Falcor, first of all, the JSON isn't local; it's in your HTTP source. And with get value, you put your path in strings separated by commas. Okay, so we talked about the Fed deciding how much of the data to bring. And in the Netflix use case, this is very important because each dot in the Netflix database is connected to an endless amount of data. You have related videos, and related videos have stars, and stars have other videos they've been in, and genre lists have maybe sub-genre lists. And there's all this interconnection, and so how can we really decide how much of that title, how much of that movie do we want to bring down to the client? I mean, who can decide? And if you want to make a change in that, the depth of your query, that can be a whole series of operations just to make it deeper. So with Falcor, you have that single endpoint. Here it's member JSON. Okay, so you're getting you're asking for a certain, let's say it's a house of cards at that point. In the view, you say, here they're showing us an example of a template engine that can do async binding, which is kind of like perfect for Falcor, so you could actually write the functions to Falcor within your view. And let's say up until now we were asking for a name and description, and now we want to know the staff. So the developer can just go into the view, add the staff because he knows it's in the JSON graph. And the call goes to the URL using a query string that breaks down exactly what they're asking for. Okay, so what are the really cool points about Falcor? Like we said, one model everywhere, a virtual JSON that gives you all your data seamlessly. You go to one place to fetch all your data. Smart and configurable cache management, including invalidation. They claim to have pretty much solved the issue of cache invalidation and make it really handle it for you. And then batching, deduping, these are optimizations, and many more optimization features. I'm not touching all of them that are part of the library that really do what Netflix was out to do, is minimize the number of calls to their server. And they claim that Falcor is being used for the last few years in all Netflix UI. Until last night, I really couldn't check that. I had no way of checking that, so last night I logged in quickly. I created an account, and it looks like it's a bit different from the developer preview that's out now, but it definitely is a JSON graph, and it looks like they're using it. They truly are using it in. So why not Falcor? Okay, so we'll see when we get to the code. You'll see that there is a bit of amount of setup and maintenance overhead that could be painful if you're not really feeling the performance boost. And Falcor its main idea was to minimize mass reads using a custom built cache. So custom built cache, they say it's really great. It has to be tested. It has to be tested, and for robustness. Again, Falcor is made for JSON graph to help with references within your JSON file. And if you have a simple data structure, that's a tree, again, maybe overkill. And lastly, it's still in development preview stage, so can it be trusted? They're using it in Netflix, but what they gave to the public probably isn't the exact same state as what they're using next. Okay, so before we go on to show some code and app review, any questions?
What does the client library, the client side library does? Except wrapping the JSON, the response?
Well, first it breaks down your request into a JSON path. It checks the cache to see if it can be served from the local cache. And then when it gets the response, the JSON graph doesn't feed you JSON graph, it feeds you JSON, but
So it will cache locally also, and will send only part of the request to the
right, it will check exactly what it has and what it doesn't, and it will ask for what it doesn't. Okay. So in our sample app, this is what Guy Rotem left before he escaped the country. In the JSON graph, in this sample app, we have a meta site. Each meta site can have multiple domains. Each domain can have multiple mailboxes. So if you can imagine a plain REST application, so you'd have, let's say, meta site /0/domain/0/mailbox/0. That would be like a REST address for the first mailbox or the first domain or the first meta site. Okay. So let's have a look at the server first. So we're using here Node Express with a single endpoint, and we're feeding it to a Falcon Express data source graph. This returns, for each request, this returns a router that will take care of looking at the query string and going in and getting data for the request. So let's look at the last example. So we get, if I can translate that REST request to the Falco request, so we get user sites, give it here 0 or multiple numbers. That would, we would say we want domain 0, mailbox 0, and username from there. In this case, that would go in and do quite a lot of work, going to different services and collecting data. But then in the end, it will just return this simple path and value object that has the JSON graph. Okay, and up here I have an example of what server-side redirect means. So we have a route called mySite, and let's say we could use the request cookies to see who the user is. Go to the database and get user sites, the ID of the user site that was returned from based on the cookies. And that, before going back to the client, that would then go to this route, because this is of type ref, okay? That would go to this route and get the information for this route. And if we were using a different style API, you might have to go get my site, get the ID from the user site, go back to the client, and then go back again, asking for the user site information. Okay. So in the sample, all we have really is an input asking for a JSON graph query, a button to go get the information, and the result will be just put into a div. Free.
So the really long one at the end. So then you actually query for one user sites, you get one domains and then one user accounts, and then you return the username and admin for that account. Right?
Something I did mention is that in Falcon you can only query for properties. You can't query at all for objects. You tell the Falcon what properties you want on a certain object, on a certain entity, and it'll give you those. And you can send multiple requests and build a large object for your view. But you're asking for properties. So now, here I can actually ask for the first 5 user sites. Of those 5 user sites, give me the first 3 connected domains. And of those, give me the first 2 user accounts. And for each of those, give me the username and admin.
This is something that writing production code that is all of the nested query inside one out.
Right, so I asked the same question, I don't know. I would think that you'd be able to say that this sits within some other route, give it a route key, and say this sits under this route key, and that would make it shorter. And but really to answer your question is that it really is a lot of setup. You have to set up every single property. You can set up some properties together in an array, like username is admin, but those properties, that again, it's a list. You can't. One nice thing about using DTOs is that you just say, okay, take this object, give me the object. You don't have to specify in each request exactly what properties. But by doing this, by saying exactly what properties, you're building your JSON graph. You're building the shape of your domain model, and like I said, and everybody can then use that. In the controller, we create a Falcon model and give it that single endpoint. Then send the query from the input and put the result in the result div. So let's try that. So let's first test that that server site redirect. And say I want my site that user name. Site name, sorry. Okay. Right, I'm running Falcon queries within the JSON graph queries within the input. Okay, so now we got back. We asked for my sites, but we got back a list of user sites because of that redirect. Now let me ask for user sites 0 through 2. And I want to ask for 2 properties. I want to ask for site name, and I want to ask for meta site ID. Okay. So, like you asked, Itai, you can see here that for site 0, the request returned only the meta site ID because the site name was already in the cache. And for the other 2, it returned the full set.
Now, if you actually ask for 0 to 4, it will only download 3 and 4.
I don't remember how many we have.
It's only 3 and 4 because 0 to 2 is already there.
Right, 3 and 3, 4 don't exist.
So that's a really nice way to do pagination.
always ask for the amount of stuff you want to present.
Right, and when Falco client sees that the type is error, it won't serve it doesn't serve it in the JSON itself. You see in the JSON on top, it wasn't served the JSON as errors, it was just kept inside the JSON graph. And the JSON graph always returns with everything you asked for. There's always a full set of everything you asked for, but it'll tell you if you found it, didn't find it, if there was a problem. Okay, so you can also send multiple requests at a time.
This is the full deep queries about the report.
So we got that first username for the first connected domain for the first user site. And at the same time, well, they're both on the user sites, right? For 0, we got this full information. For 1 and 2, which was the other part of the request, we got the site name metadata.
How does it handle errors if it has only a partial part of the graph it cannot return?
Right, so that's what we're seeing here. It's just giving you your object, because again you're always asking for simple information for a single property, and that property can be of type ref or type error or type value. And in this case, it's type error, and so the Falco client side isn't taking it and putting it into the JSON graph, just leaves it there.
You can understand, for this demo, where is the data coming from? It's not real servers, right?
Server without config.
What?
It's a server without config.
It's like a node server with a CASA model. But if we want to connect it to our real servers, to our dashboard server, I don't know, MetaSite, do you need to change the server response? That's the okay, you have to change.
It's not such a big deal because it's the front-end server concept that we're talking about. Your server, it's all it does is implements the Falco protocol, and it collects all the data from internal servers. So you don't have to change anything good, you just need to write another server which knows how to interact with your clients. It knows how to answer the queries that this client wants to query.
Again, we have the Falco router, which is a technology we do not touch, right?
The Falco router is something that you use inside your server. You tell it if someone is going to ask for MetaSite, then this is the code that I need to run, and I will return to the MetaSite code that you use. And this code can go to a site manager.
But you have one Falco server, one Falco router.
Yeah, it's a one application.
No, you can break it down to as you want, but you can't have one router for your entire company. So I did skip that. Here we have our internal services that are purely our code. There's no Falco in them, and within the router we access the data using our internal servers, but then return a JSON graph portion. So you're always returning JSON graph portions. And okay, so I didn't talk at all about setting. Falco also knows how to set values. And one nice thing about the way it sets values, when we set a value, it always returns the actual state of the JSON graph after the update. So you can really make changes on the fly. You could always update the view immediately.
You have an example of query updates?
No, it's not the same. I didn't get into set at all. I didn't do a sample of set, but it does have set, and it also has function calls. You can define function calls on the JSON graph and call the function and return a certain interface again of a JSON graph portion that was updated. And like I said, there are a lot of it's a pretty simple API, but really powerful. A lot of neat optimization features. You know, and Jafar Hussain, like I said, there's a link at the end of the slideshow. He loves talking about Falcor. He has a lot of talks on Falcor, and really intriguing.
I have two questions. One, we want to check the option to combine it with Angular, and so we'll have to sync it with the desktop with the Ansible server.
Right. So at Netflix, they don't have direct view binding. They have another layer in the client that deals with getting data, bringing it to the view, and doing the binding. But with a template engine that's async, you can write the Falcor get returns a promise style object. Maybe you could tweak your async filter to work with it, and you can just write JSON paths right into the view. It will on Scope Digest. It will collect all the paths you need, send them as a single HTTP request, and retrieve the data. Because it's its own promise.
Then inside the view, you can actually use the promise. The problem with doing is that all of the stuff that you call the JSON up, it does promises. And then you can't really put it inside the view. You need to get from graph there, and then put it in some bar, and then you have a lot of the template. But then you don't have the data, you also have the async file. It's just mentioned. And you know what, I think that Netflix did something. It's really easy to write your own.
They weren't using Angular. They're using React. They said they did build a service layer between the Falcor and the views.
Another question, it's really similar to the mind of metal. So you have a chance to see differences. And if you want to the pump sensor said this is made for fetching data, and metal is for the writes.
Right. Right. So I did mention that in one of the why nots. That's really optimized for reading, to minimize the reads. Writing, I don't know if it's a great performance boost for writing, and I purposely didn't go into different competing libraries. Like I said, the mega scale companies all looked for a better solution for data fetching and client server communication.
Also, really from Facebook, which does roughly the same thing.
What's the Facebook?
Really. Is the protocol that really uses.
Like Falcor uses async graph.
I think that it's more complex. This is only about communication and also framework. It's really about how you write applications.
Okay, that's all. Any more questions? Thank you very much.
נבדוק, כן? אוקיי, אני אסביר לגבי מה עכשיו.